Monday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. Monday night. It's not the usual Sunday night, but we will have to make do because Jake was a little, worse for wear yesterday. Needed a little time off to recuperate from a,
Let's
from a, a Vegas trip. Let's just call it what it is, a Vegas
yeah,
trip.
a good friend of mine got married out in Vegas. Shouts to Matt if he ever hears this or ever would listen to this. But really wonderful time. Definitely had a fair amount of the adult beverages and as hockey players say, right? I was playing guilty yesterday, right? Isn't that a saying?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
I think
But
so.
that means you're playing well though, doesn't it?
I guess I don't know, but regardless, and overall, we may actually have a full-on shift coming to Mondays, anyways, for the show, depending on how our beer league schedule goes. So
Yeah. I
get ready for it, folks.
I just wanted to put you on blast
I know, and
because that's
just to put you on blast right now, um,
wow.
everyone in the Twitch chat, please be kind to Felix.
Oh yeah.
I am putting this out there beforehand. Felix has not watched the Leafs Habs game. He is going to watch it after this. He does not want to be spoiled. So any questions that you ask that are pertaining to that series or that game, if you ask them, will not get answered.
Yeah, I may just not look at the Twitch chat. I'm sorry, folks. I'm gonna rely on Jake. I mean, I'm not always the best at looking at it anyway, if I'm being 100% honest, but for today, I'm gonna have to avoid it. But today's show is gonna be a fun one because we already had an idea of what we were gonna talk about, which isn't always the case, but it was this time in the off season. I think we're gonna try a little harder to have a theme for each show since the news may be kind of up and down, but the Ducks actually gifted us a topic today. A very
Yeah, they
interesting
did.
topic. Yeah, very interesting topic. The Ducks hired a new assistant GM, a vice president, executive vice president of hockey operations. And that is very interesting because we talked on the last show about David McNabb's retirement. And so Jeff Solomon comes in to replace David McNabb as essentially the cap guru, the
And
go-to guy for all things CBA.
yep, and for those that don't know, Jeff Solomon had been working in the LA Kings organization from 06-07 until now. His title over in that organization was he was an executive vice president of hockey operations and legal affairs. Prior to joining the Kings, he was a player agent for about 20 years, representing the likes of Tony Granato, Steve Sullivan, Brian McCabe. And prior to that, he was actually a lawyer in tax and estate. Is that right?
Yes.
And so he has his Juris Doctorate from the University of San Diego. And so very, very smart guy by all accounts, has not only worked within hockey, he's worked in other different types of things with accounting and different things like that, been on the player side of it, been on the team side of it, and really seems like he's a smart guy that kind of has been in the weeds on a lot of different things, running the LA Kings cap over what can be one of their most successful periods, 06-07 until currently. Definitely there are maybe some contracts that would not have been the best ever with like the Jonathan Quick deal, different things like that. But I think in that same breath, you need to give him credit that he was able to negotiate and or to navigate the cap complications that came from those deals and kept the LA Kings contending throughout all of that. And they also had dealt how I don't know how many people out there remember this, but the Slava Voinov situation was very tough on their salary cap situation. Same thing with the Mike Richards situation, really caused some headaches there. And he was the guy at the head of it all for the Kings, putting that essentially keeping the boat running in the right direction, keeping the ship sailing and staying cap compliant all throughout that process. And I believe also dealt with things like salary arbitration, some contract negotiations with RFAs. And so it sounds as if he's going to be in a very, very similar situation when he joins the Ducks. The biggest thing is he's now going to be an assistant general manager. And that was a title that he did not have in LA.
Yeah, and just kind of texting people that cover the Kings, it sounds like that's what he wanted in LA and that he just wasn't going to get with the way that their structure was kind of set up with their management chain. And so looking at just the language here, the articles that have been written about it, there was a mutual parting of ways between the LA Kings and Jeff Solomon. So I think that this is a big win for the Ducks. We were just talking about this last week about what kind of person the Ducks
Yeah.
need in that chair. And this is almost to a T what we were talking about last week.
I'm pretty sure I said a lawyer would be fantastic, an accountant would be fantastic,
Yeah,
someone good with numbers.
You also snuck in engineer.
I did.
Just,
I did. You know, have to.
Hey, that's fine.
But like that checks the boxes. Lawyer and had dealt with tax. Like that is the exact type of person, someone that can get into the minutia of the CBA and trust
complicated
me,
stuff.
The CBA is not easy to understand, and so this is a very, very good hire for the Ducks. From all accounts, he seems like he's a very, very smart guy, very plugged in. And not necessarily to be a slight at McNabb, but the Ducks are going from a guy that was came up as being a scout, and worked his way up from there. And from that person running their cap to a lawyer through tax and a player agent and everything like that. And I feel like on the surface, without knowing them at all, you would rather have the lawyer that had dealt with tax situations and things like that to be running your cap. That just seems like the logical point there.
Well, and also, I don't know how long he actually practiced law for. It doesn't seem like it was the longest, but the point is, though, he was also a player agent for a long time. And I think having been on the other side of those negotiations is helpful when you're on the team side.
Yes.
Because you can kind of understand the give and the take. And so I'm fascinated by this because I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I was not really...
This came out of left field.
I was not caught up on the Jeff Solomon story. Like, I wasn't that kind of aware of his track record, but having read into it today, having texted, like I was saying, Kings people, it just sounds like everyone's really high on this hire. Everyone's really kind of giving rave reviews about Jeff Solomon. And so this is it's funny how like this for a lot of people would probably fly under the radar because it's not like a coaching change. It's not a GM change. It's not an ownership change. Like, of course, those are the big things. And if those things change, that really matters. But I think this is one of those sneaky bits of news that is going to end up potentially having a really big impact for the Ducks.
I definitely agree there. And this is one where I think some people may wonder why they're doing this as compared to trading a guy or anything else or firing guys, different things like that. And at the end of the day, the Ducks are going into a very tumultuous offseason with the expansion draft coming up, with the fact that they're going to have a very high pick, the fact that they have so many RFAs, and they just lost the guy that ran their salary cap to retirement. And that's a pretty pivotal situation or pivotal role for a team with contracts and everything like that. And so this was probably priority number one for them to be able to get this role filled. So they had someone within the organization that could handle that. And now, granted, to me, this is a clear sign that are not going to be any firings. There's going to be no cleaning house or anything like that for this Ducks organization this summer. What we have now is what we're going to be moving forward, because if this wasn't the case, then I would have expected, or I wouldn't have expected this hiring to be announced in this way. I would have expected other things to happen first. So to me, this is a clear sign that Jeff Solomon, at least for this year, is going to be working under Bob Murray.
Yes, and that is the elephant in the room, is that Bob Murray's contract is up next season, or after next season. And so is part of Jeff Solomon leaving the Kings is him seeing a potential opportunity in Anaheim. Because let's face it, in LA, Rob Blake isn't going anywhere. Luc Robitaille isn't going anywhere. The upward mobility for him just wasn't there. So already now, just off the bat with Anaheim, he has the additional title of AGM, and there is a runway here for him to potentially have another step up next season.
Yeah, and I think kind of that brings me to kind of my big question here of why make the move to Anaheim? Because that was, I think, the first question that I had, because on the surface,
I think part of it is, it sounds like he just didn't want to have to move.
Yeah.
And,
so
he accomplished that here.
On the surface, when you look at this, it's a guy that's going from being an executive vice president of hockey operations to a very similar role in another rival organization, but also, as you've mentioned, gaining the assistant GM's GM position. And I think that you're pretty spot on with the upward mobility being probably a key part in this, because it sounds as if that the Kings had known about this for a little bit now, and so he probably had it lined up with the fact that I guess it had been well known that Dave McNabb was planning to retire after this year. And so he probably had reached out to the Ducks and wanted to get an opportunity. I guess my question is this a Samueli hire or a Bob Murray hire? Because if you're Bob Murray, are you really wanting to go out and get a guy like this that maybe is coming in looking at the upwards mobility of it, knowing that your contract's going to be up at the end of the year? It really seems like this is pure speculation, obviously, but this seems like a Samueli hire to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question is who was driving the bus on this hire. I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind is that they had to hire a guy for this
Mm-hmm.
to fill this
Mm-hmm.
slot. Like they had to do this. And so, I mean, being where Bob Murray is at in his career, almost anyone you hire
Yeah.
has that
Yeah.
potential, right?
Definitely.
And now, I mean, when Martin Madden got named assistant GM, everybody had the same reaction, right?
Yeah.
But
And
I think the issue with Martin Madden though is that he's far more limited in his skill set.
I was going to say that I think if you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for a potential replacement to Bob Murray, I think Solomon more so fits that role than a Martin Madden would, because Martin Madden, for all of the people that want to get behind him, and rightfully so, he's made some good picks. He's a scout. That's what he's done. We don't necessarily know how he does in the negotiation table. We don't know what his knowledge of the CBA is. All these different
Well, he
things that,
hasn't had to do any of those
yeah,
things.
all these things that go into being a general manager. Whereas Solomon seems to have done that. He seems to have had his fingers in kind of everything within the Kings organization. He seems to be someone that obviously has a great understanding of the CBA and the salary cap, someone that understands how to negotiate with players, basically everything that you need to know in order to be a general manager in this league. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why, to me, this hiring, I think you're spot on that this seems like a potential replacement or heir apparent to Bob Murray.
Yeah, and so we'll have to see. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the Ducks are going to do with Bob Murray after next year. You know, does he get brought back on another kind of short-term deal? Who knows? But it will be interesting. And I think if you're a Ducks fan for today at least, this is a cause for optimism in
Yeah,
the in the long in
and
the
I
long
think
term.
one thing I want to point out, and I'm trying to look this up to just get some confirmation on it. But I was reading an article earlier today that kind of made it seem like Solomon is he's not necessarily a hockey guy either. He's someone that kind of got into it through being a player agent, and he wasn't necessarily a huge sports guy at that point in time. But he kind of has with 20 years of being a player agent, you start to pick up on a lot of things, and that's why he moved over to the team side eventually. And
Mm-hmm.
so personally, as someone who's really kind of harped on this a bunch, I think having someone who didn't come up through being a guy that had to have played the game, I think that that's a really good thing, because that means he thinks the game differently. He comes from a different background and can bring a different experience along with them. And I think that that's really important, because I think too many times we see guys that become general managers are former players, and that's not necessarily meant to be a knock, because look at what Joe Sakic's doing. But
Mm-hmm.
I
But
think having
but guys like Sakic and Yzerman did work their way up. They
true.
didn't just get catapulted into the GM chair.
True,
So,
true, definitely. But
mhm.
I think if you look at, for instance, Kyle Dubas, someone who came from a completely non-traditional route, and it's not someone that ever played the game at a high level. And I think that those are the types of guys I want to see more of in this game, because I think that's what's going to push the game forward and keep it from being left kind of in the dust in this older generation.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting about the wording in the Ducks press release is that they mentioned that of the things he'll oversee. So we already talked about the salary cap, contract arbitration, also and player evaluation. That's something that they specifically put in there. And I mean, I'm just kind of I guess curious about what that means. You know, is he how much of a say will he have? It sounds like he'll have quite a bit of say in who gets brought in moving forward. And if you look at the Kings roster the last couple of years, they've definitely made a shift towards kind of a more skilled roster, adding a little bit more speed, kind of going away, I think, from what they used to be. And so I don't know how much of that Solomon was on board with in LA, but regardless, it'll just be interesting to see if there's any kind of change in what kind of players the Ducks target.
Yeah, definitely. I think that overall, I think it's going to be interesting to see how much of a difference this offseason is. And I think that we're going to be able to specifically key in on a key change in the front office, and be able
Mm-hmm.
to look at kind of, this is why this change is happening. Also, in the same tune, if they do exactly the same thing as they've done in previous seasons, I think that's a sign of the influence that Bob Murray has on this team.
More lateral trades,
Yeah.
more shuffling of deck chairs. Let's go.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it.
I do just want to point out, because you brought that up, news today of Andre Kasha being done for the playoffs, which is that's a trade that we've talked a lot about on this
Hmm.
show. And does that at all affect your assessment of it now, knowing that?
I mean, It's tough to say. I mean, I think that neither side is necessarily aged perfectly. I think the Ducks getting Jacob Perreault is helpful, but the fact that the way the salary cap has gone and that type of situation has kind of made the David Backes evaluation part of it poor. And then the Andre Kasha side, 100%. He's been injured. It's definitely reduced his thing. So you can definitely come out and say the Ducks got the better end of it because they got the first round pick in Axel Anderson. But I'm not sure as if it's this huge win that kind of people are parading around because of Kasha getting hurt, that it was the right time. Obviously, I think that it's a horrible thing with him being injured, and they were probably right on moving him. There's just issues with that trade, I think, still.
Yeah, and I mean that's the big takeaway here is just that it's such a bummer that like he just legitimately cannot stay healthy, and we'll just have to see kind of if what his future is. Because I mean, at this point, if you think about all the injuries he's had, the concussions, I really just wonder if he should keep playing, if he should keep going. Is it even safe for him to keep playing? It's not what you want to really, be talking about with the player, but we'll see what happens there. So, did you have anything else you wanted to say on the Jeff Solomon hire?
No, I think I'm all good.
Okay. Well, on that note, so the plan for today before the news broke was that we wanted to do like a Ducks offseason plan of attack, essentially. So just go over the three key components of this offseason: the expansion draft, the entry draft, and free agency. Go through each one and just talk about what we would do. Jake wrote a really good article on the expansion draft last week, very detailed. So he'll pretty much just say everything about the expansion draft. And we'll just kind of go through this and just give you our thoughts of what we think the Ducks should do, what we think maybe they might do, and see where it all lands. Maybe we'll predict something that'll happen. Maybe
Maybe.
we'll find a diamond in the rough in all this. Who knows? Maybe we'll be accidental geniuses,
Yeah.
or we could just look like complete idiots. We'll see.
Hey, that's normal for us, though. It happens. It happens.
Also, let's do one of these. Let's do the expansion draft, and then after that, we can probably take a break.
Yep.
And then we'll finish the rest off because this is the big one.
Yep.
So with the expansion draft, you wrote the article, so this is obviously your topic. But I do want to ask you because you did put it in the article. But for those who haven't read, if you haven't, you should go check it out. It's at crashthepond.com. Who do you expect the Ducks to protect in this expansion draft?
So who do I expect, or who do I, if I were the general manager?
Well, let's just start with who do you expect? Let's just kind of lay that groundwork. Let's just give it some realism.
Okay, so my expected protection list for what the Ducks will do, and let me just quickly run through the rules of the expansion draft for those that don't necessarily know how it's going to work, and so I think that that's kind of an important part of all of this. And so the Ducks can protect, because most of you out there probably know, but some of you might not. The Ducks can protect either 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie, or 8 skaters and 1 goalie. And so obviously if you go 7-3-1, that allows you to protect 11 players. If you go 8 skaters and 1 goalie, that allows you to protect 9 players as compared to the 11. So you're able to protect 2 less, but you're able to pick any combination of forwards and defensemen to fill those 8 spots. And then all first and second year pros are exempt from the expansion draft. And your professional experience for this is defined as 11 games or more in the NHL for players 18 or 19 years of age, or 1 or more NHL game, AHL game, or European professional game for players who turn 30 prior to December 31st, 2020. And that player also has to be signed to an NHL contract at that point in time. And any player with no movement clause that continues, and that's the key part, continues into the 21-22 season must be protected. And then they must expose 2 forwards and 1 defenseman that fit the 27-54 rule. That's 27 games played in the 2021 season, or 54 games over the 1920 and 2021 season. And I think the only other thing is players with potential career-ending injuries could be exempt from it. And so I believe Ryan Kessler is fitting that role, and if not, doesn't really matter. He doesn't have to be protected because his no movement clause is changing to a no trade clause going into next year. So to run through my expected protection list, this is one that I really spent some time thinking on to really kind of put it together because I kept on thinking the Ducks were going to go 7-3-1, 7-3-1, 7-3-1. But the fact that they acquired Hayden Fleury really makes me think that they're going to go 8 skaters. And so I think that they're going to protect 4 defensemen. I think they're going to protect Lindholm, Manson, Fleury, and Fowler. You don't go out of your way to trade for Hayden Fleury if you're not going to protect him, and you don't basically hold on to Josh Manson and move or not move him at the deadline if you're not going to protect him at the trade or at the expansion draft. And then for the forwards, I would probably go. I'm thinking they're going to go Raquel, Terry, Lundestrom, and the fourth forward. It's kind of tough. Whether they go Steele, Jones, Milano, Heinen. I mean, I think that they probably go Sam Steele.
Well, yeah, in your article you wrote Steele, and I feel like he is still the likeliest because he's the one that they've had the highest hopes for.
Yep, exactly.
And I don't think Max Jones, like I think this would have been a season where Max Jones could have went out and taken that spot from Sam Steele with a strong year, and he didn't do that. And because of that, I think they default to Steele still. He's a center, and I think that they prioritize that.
Yep, I agree completely. And so that's why I would do that. And so those are the players I would protect. So basically, the Ducks would be exposing Josh Mahura. They would be exposing Sonny Milano, Danton Heinen, Max Jones, Brendan Gooley, Kevin Shattenkirk, a lot of different guys there. I mean, who would you expect with those guys kind of having been listed? Who would you expect the Kraken to select from the Ducks with those being the players? So just to run through all the players that would be eligible and not protected, there will also be Adam Henrique, Jacob Silverberg, Heinen, Milano, Rowney, Delorier, Jones, Letary, Volkov, all those kind of AHLers. Then for defense, you've got Larson, you've got Shattenkirk, you've got Gooley, you've got Walensky, you've got Mahura.
So I think that
also, I should note Stolars would also be would not be protected. It would be Gibson, obviously. So Stolars would be eligible to be taken.
Yeah, and Stolar's, by the way, injured at the World Championships. Yeah. So done for the World Championships, but sounds like he should be good for this season, upcoming season. So the issue with this list, the guys who are exposed, isn't so much there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just the fact that I don't see Seattle being really tempted by any of the younger players. And then you look at Sonny Milano and the potentially concerning injury situation that's developing there. So I could see them picking up Kevin Shattenkirk just because he's relatively inexpensive. Well, yeah, he's relatively inexpensive. He's not tied up to a bunch of term, right? He's got 2 more years left after this. He is an analytically friendly player, which maybe we shouldn't discount that. And I could just see them saying, there's no like diamond in the rough in here. Let's just go get sure value, have kind of a placeholder guy for a couple of years and just go from there.
I mean, it's possible they do that. And then he could be their first captain even.
Yeah. But like I could see Kevin Shattenkirk being playing a nice role for the Kraken.
That honestly wasn't even the route I was kind of looking at with this, mainly because I could see them seeing a Max Jones who's 20 was Jones. He's 22. Josh Mahura, same age range as Max Jones. And thinking, let's get the 22 to 23-year-old. Yes, it's more of a sure thing in terms of value for the next 2 years with Kevin Shattenkirk with what he's going to bring. But let's take the risk. Let's get the younger guy to potentially build in. It gives us a younger guy that can be on the roster for 5 to 6 years that the team can watch grow, watch build, and go from there. So to me, I would probably expect them to take Josh Mahura or Max Jones out of those guys if that was left exposed. I think mainly because you're getting a younger player, you're getting a guy in the 22 to 23 age range that will be on this roster for essentially the first 5 to 6 years of the franchise. And maybe they might not be impact players, but they're able to be players that the team can watch grow and the fans there can watch grow. And so I think that, it really depends on what Seattle's trying to do with their team. And I think that's going to be the key thing. I don't fully expect them to prioritize being good next year. Mm-hmm. And so I think with that being the case, that's why I don't foresee them necessarily taking a Kevin Shattenkirk.
Yeah, my issue with them taking Jones or Mahura is I just don't think either of those guys have shown enough to where picking them, there's a lot of like untapped value there.
I think there's some with Mahura, but it's not huge. It's not huge. I 100% agree. I know where you're going with it.
I watched Mahura over the weekend playing for the Gulls, and he looks fine. He looks like a solid puck moving defenseman. But I've significantly cooled on him. Maybe it's a little bit of small sample. Maybe he should be playing more, and we'll see what the Kraken do. So that's your expected list. Now let's turn the page over to what would you do? This is now plan of attack. So what do you do here?
So the funny thing is I kind of went out on a limb just to be fun with my personal lists because
Okay.
why not? And
Don't be a coward.
it's not as if the Ducks have this wealth of talent that they have to protect. And so I could go either way with it, whether I want to do 7-3-1 or 8. The one thing that I did in both of them, though, just because I wanted to be fun with it, be different, be bold, and take a risk, I exposed Cam Fowler on both of my lists.
Yeah.
And the logic there is essentially Cam Fowler is locked up to a very hefty deal for a long time. Let me just double check, but I believe he has 5 years left on his deal.
Yeah,
It's $6.5 million. And really limited no trade clause. It's almost a no move clause. It's a 4-team yes list. So he can say pick 4 teams that he'll go to, and that's it. So this is not necessarily me saying Cam Fowler is a bad defenseman. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think he was one of the Ducks' best defensemen this past year. One of the best players this past year. I think I gave him the MVP for the team. But I look at that deal and I'm like, are the Ducks going to have this Cam Fowler 5 years from now making 6.5? Like, this contract's not going to age well.
Well, they didn't even have this Cam Fowler 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have no idea how long this will continue for.
So there's kind of 2 things at play here. I don't think Seattle will take him, because I think Seattle are going to look at that contract and they're not going to want to have that on their books for the next 5 years as he's declining. Seattle has a lot of very, very smart people in their front office. And so I expect them to not want to take on some negative value contracts. On the flip side, they may say, well, we're not going to be at the cap, or we're trying to get to the cap floor. That's going to help us. He's a good player. He's going to help us in the now. So they may do it.
Could be the captain. If we're going to go down that rabbit hole.
I think that what they may look at is, though, look at Vegas. Vegas, 2 to 3 years in, every penny counted for them against the cap. And so if you have this guy 4 or 5 years when you are going to be up against the cap making $6.5 million, I think that's some of the long-term planning that they're going to be doing with this franchise. And so I think that he's almost an additional protection slot due to having that contract. And so that's why I would do it. And even if they do take him, even if that does happen, worst case scenario, they take him. Sure, the Ducks are worse next year. There's no doubt about that. I think you lose Cam Fowler for nothing, that makes you worse. But this isn't a situation where you lost a guy that had high trade value that could have helped you with getting value back in return. Cam Fowler, I think, doesn't have a whole lot of trade value because essentially you saw what Taylor Hall got at the deadline. Similar type of thing with Cam Fowler. Not a full no move clause, but a 4-team list. And so it's not like the Ducks would be losing a Josh Manson or a Hampus Lindholm to Seattle and essentially getting nothing in return. And that would hurt because both those guys have very high trade value right now on very tradable deals. And so it's hurting the future of the franchise. Whereas if the Ducks were to lose Fowler, that's opening up $6.5 million for the next 5 years in cap space. Where if the Ducks want to re-sign Lindholm, they now can just give him the Fowler contract. Give him those $6.5 million. And I think you and I both agree Lindholm's the better defenseman than Cam Fowler. And the Ducks now have better cap allocation as a result of that. And so I think it's a bit of a risk, but it's one that is kind of a win-win. If he doesn't get taken by Seattle, you essentially just gained an extra protection slot. If he is taken by Seattle, well, then you just gained $6.5 million for the next 5 years that you can now give that contract to Lindholm if you want to. So it's a win-win on that front. So with that being said, my 7-3-1, I did Lindholm, Manson, and then one of Fleury or Mahura. I'm not really that tied to either one. I would pick one of them, and I would probably go Mahura over the two just because he's younger, honestly. But one of the two of them. And then for the forwards, I mean, you can basically protect everyone in some form of worth protecting. Of Raquel, Terry, Lundestrom, Jones, Steele, Heinen, Milano. Protect all of them. And if you go 8 skaters, then you're back in the same position with the forwards of Raquel, Terry, Lundestrom, and then one of Steele or Jones. And in defense, you can protect Lindholm, Manson, Fleury, and Mahura.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, both of those lists are fascinating. I think that the whole idea of exposing Fowler, it makes a lot of sense. It makes almost too much sense.
Yeah.
Like, this is something they should do.
It is. Yes, it's something that I realized, I think, as we were doing a podcast a while ago, and it's like, this makes way too much sense. There's no way they're going to do it.
I don't think they're going to do it because of the optics.
Yeah, I agree.
Because of the
that's something I didn't necessarily mention in the article, but I think that that's something Murray in some ways cares about. And I think the optics of waiving this veteran player, exposing this veteran player, might not look that great. And he somewhat cares about that.
Yeah. On the flip side, I mean, if you talk to him about it
It's
before
also
you,
it's also a business.
yeah, like that's the thing. At the end of the
Guys
day,
get traded.
exactly. And
This is the same guy that traded Shea Theodore for so that the Ducks would or the Clayton Stoner would be taken. Like,
and so that brings me to the next bullet point. So one of the things that marked the last expansion draft for Vegas was side deals and deals with teams jostling around, trying to find ways to hold on to guys, trying to maneuver their own situations, with Vegas profiting off of that. Do you see a possibility for that here with the Ducks, good or bad?
no, I don't really see a need. I don't think the Ducks are that high on Josh Maher where they're going to do that to protect him. I don't think they're that high on Sam Steele where they're going to do that to protect him. If they did do that to protect a Sam Steele or Max Jones, then help us all. This is
trade Terry to Seattle,
like
to protect Steele.
oh my God. One thing we haven't mentioned actually, and so it's funny because of just kind of where they're at. Does Seattle take one of Henrique or Silverberg?
I mean, I think that's a possibility that we kind of seem to be taking for granted.
We gloss
won't
over
happen.
it a decent amount.
Well, I just think we're assuming that those contracts are just pariahs and that they will not touch them.
Or, I mean, this isn't something I really even looked at as a potential option. Do the Ducks protect either of those?
It just makes no sense to protect them.
No, but
it legitimately makes no sense to protect them.
For the same reason as not exposing Fowler, Henrique, I think is for sure. Henrique's not protected.
That bridge is burned.
That bridge is burned completely.
That bridge is gone.
But Silverberg, maybe.
But at the same time, look, it would be kind of a rough look after they announced that he played through injury to expose him.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, thanks for playing through injury for us and beating up your hip even further. Oh, and by the way, you might just have to pick up and move your whole life because we're exposing you. I mean, I just don't see the Kraken picking up Silverberg. I really think that is not a contract that anyone seems to be interested in taking on. I mean, we had a decent debate on the last pod about Silverberg's season and his grade and the injury history there. Like, it just seems like I don't know who in their right mind would take him right now.
A hip injury to a guy in his 30s is scary. It's sketchy. Like, regardless of the procedure, regardless of everything.
Yeah, it's just anytime you see those three letters, HIP, you just
think about how important the hip is to skating.
Yeah, I mean, think about how important the hip is to like getting out of bed.
True.
So let alone skating.
I mean, here's the real kicker from Fire Carlisle. This would be the potential thing that they do. Does Murray try to incentivize Seattle to take one of Henrique or Silverberg? Henrique would be the one that I could see him doing that for because I don't think Murray views Silverberg in the same light that he views Henrique.
Well, so what's the enticer though?
I mean, maybe it is. Maybe he. I don't know. I mean. Maybe he sends a pick their way.
I wouldn't be doing that if I was the Ducks. I think you find another way to get rid of him outside of having to give up your own picks.
Yeah.
That just seems
Agreed.
that seems like you're doubling down on a sunk
does
cost.
Murray view this draft just not being good? So he's like, I'm going to trade my second to get out of this contract because I don't think that second's going to be anything.
I mean, maybe.
Is a second enough?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't love that. I don't love that thought process at all. I mean, I keep saying, I mean, the thing with Henrique's contract is it's so bad that you have to move heaven and earth just to get rid of it.
No, I'm still honestly shocked that he didn't get claimed on waivers.
Yeah, and for the Ducks, how much does it really matter for right now? Yes, you want to go and attain as much flexibility as possible, but this isn't a team that's going to be needing to spend money for just look for when Trevor Zegras when his contract is up. And then that's the deadline for when they need to really have as much flexibility as possible, which isn't for another 2 years. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So your list, just to clarify, just to kind of put a bow on that. So you're exposing Cam Fowler. That to me is the big takeaway from your list.
Yes. 100%. I'm exposing him because I think even though he's a good player, I think it's a win-win either way. Either you just gain an extra protection slot that you don't actually have to use because his contract is that for him. Or if he is taken, as great of a player as he is, and as much as it's going to hurt next year, the Ducks aren't. This isn't about next season for the Ducks. And that's something we've tried to really force that point home. This is not about next season for this team. This is about 2 to 3 years down the line for this team, and gaining that $6.5 million in cap flexibility over those seasons is going to be really important for this team, especially if Cam Fowler's play declines, like it most likely honestly is going to once he gets into his 30s. This is just how it goes. Look at Adam Henrique. Look at Jakob Silverberg. Look at these guys that everyone at the time said, of course they need to be re-signed. Of course, give them whatever they need. And 2 to 3 years later, it's not looking great once they hit 30. Like, it sucks. It is what it is. Injuries happen. Your bodies start to break down. It's not the player's fault. And I don't blame the players either for taking the money, because that's like
of course not.
This is on inept management thinking that you should be paying players for work.
They also get arbitrarily underpaid on the front end because of the way the CBA was negotiated.
It's absolutely insane, honestly, when you think about it, that players basically get paid for their past performance and are never paid their actual worth when they're at that worth, unless your name's like Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews.
I heard an analogy for this a few years ago, and it's kind of the same thing in the job market, where when you're entry level, you get paid far less, and then as you move up, then your pay increases. And I think that's what, in a way, hockey tries to mirror, but I don't think the analogy works that great, because you're actually better when you start. Like, in a lot of jobs, when you start off and you're entry level, you don't know as much.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to pay you less.
Yeah. And the issue there is that basically it's as if 2 to 3 years in the job, you know everything in your absolute peak, and you're still getting paid like you're an entry level worker. And where, like, that's essentially what it is. And then you eventually like tail off in a couple years. And so it's just, it's baffling. It's crazy. It really should change. Like, that to me,
it won't.
It won't. And the reason
actually, it might. I mean, you hear the rumblings with Elliot Friedman on the 31 Thoughts pod, and how this generation of young players and how people around the league talk about how hard it is to negotiate with them.
Yeah.
Because of their view on this.
I'm wondering, once those guys become higher ups in the PA, how it's going to go. Because that's, at the end of the day, the big issue with it is the fact that a lot of times the people with say in the Players Association are guys that are in their 20 or 28 or 30, and they feel like they paid their dues, and so they don't necessarily want to protect because that's what they went through. And so no one's really stepping up for the kids because they don't really have a voice in the PA.
Well, look, Trevor Zegras, that next contract, I feel like he could be one of these guys that pushes for that big big second contract.
You know, let's just go bold here. Big prediction. Does Trevor Zegras hold out?
Well, look at the history of the Ducks with RFAs.
Every big RFA coming off their ELC really has held out. Any big one.
And look at the way they handled them in his rookie year. There's not the dynamic there is not the best, and nope. I think he'll scratch and claw for every inch, and as he rightfully should. Okay, that was a bit of a tangent. Let's take our break here. On the other side of that, though, we'll give you the plan for the draft itself, the entry draft, and then we'll get into free agency, and then we'll take some questions.
Yep. So today's episode is brought to you by Green Chef. So Green Chef is the first USDA certified organic meal kit company. You can enjoy clean ingredients you can trust, seasonally sourced for peak freshness. And ingredients come pre-measured, perfectly portioned, and mostly prepped, so you can spend less time stressing and more time enjoying delicious home-cooked meals. Green Chef makes eating easy and affordable with plans for every lifestyle. I mean, Felix, you've tried a bunch of different things over the last couple of years, right, in terms of eating and things like that. And I mean, Green Chef kind of attacks all of them, or gives you all the different options, right?
Yeah. So whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, or you're just looking to eat healthier in general, there's a range of recipes to suit any diet or preference. So if you're a picky eater like Jake, you'll still be okay. Even if you don't like eggs, you'll be fine.
Actually, that's pretty accurate. But
there you go.
But yeah, and they give you vegan and vegetarian options, and they give you plant-based diets. Everything's great, and it's the most sustainable meal kit on the market, offsetting 100% of its direct carbon emissions and plastic packaging in every box, so you can feel great about what you're eating and how it goes. And so Green Chef has been kind enough to send both of us some meals here, And to be honest, they're all amazing. And I'm not saying it just because they sent them to us. My wife absolutely loved all of these meals and legitimately has created a binder that holds the menus in them so that we can, or the meals in them, so that we can go out and essentially buy all of the ingredients and make them time after time. We've had the Cuban chicken with chimichurri, the Memphis style beef meatballs, and I believe my wife's favorite was the roasted sausages and creamy mash. The mashed potatoes were bonkers good. The sausages with them, it was all just absolutely amazing. Some I believe there were some onions on it. They gave you cream cheese and sour cream to go in the mashed potatoes. It was so good, and I really cannot recommend all of this enough. The food was fantastic, and honestly, if you're someone like me who's a big directions follower, the directions are super easy to follow. They're super easy to figure out what to do. And they really make cooking easy, because I think there are times when you're dealing with recipes that it can be a bit of a pain. They make it easy by laying it out for you. Like I said, on these nice cards, the backside has all the directions for it.
I love that binder.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So legitimately, and you can keep the cards forever basically to be able to go back to these recipes. So you can go to greenchef.com/90CTP and use the code 90CTP to get $90 off, including free shipping. And so you can go to greenchef.com/90CTP, CTP like Crash the Pond, 90 like $90 off, and you can use the code 90CTP to get $90 off, including free shipping. Thank you so much, Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well.
There you go. And especially with a lot of people now going back to offices slowly but surely, it's nice to have something just ready to go when you get home.
And the meals are typically for 2. And so if you are married or have a spouse, and I believe they have them for 4 also, if you have a family, you can do that. Or if you just want to be able to make stuff and you can have it as meal preps and you can have 2 servings of it, one for dinner, one for lunch the next day.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, thank you to Green Chef. Let's move on here with our next 2 items on our to-do list, our off-season to-do list. Imagine what the real one looks like for internally for the Ducks, what their to-do list looks like, their spreadsheet. Must be insane. Let's talk about the entry draft. So there's obviously multiple scenarios we could look at. I pinned down 2 that I think kind of just both sides of the extremes. Let's start with this one. Scenario 1, the Ducks win the draft lottery. They get the first overall pick. What's the plan here, Jake?
Draft Matty Beniers.
Really? That easy, huh?
That easy. It's funny. EP Ringside, great website, one of the best out there, I think, for draft talk, everything like that.
100%.
So go subscribe to them if you can. They put out their post U18 NHL draft ranking, and there was a shakeup, and it feels like it exactly aligns with my view at the draft. So maybe this is complete bias talking because it's exactly how I view it, but. Number 1 on their list, Matty Beniers. Number 2, William Eklund. Number 3, Brant Clark. And Owen Power dropped all the way down to number 4 on their list. And so for me, it really comes down to whether you want to take Beniers or Eklund. I think that those 2 have really separated themselves in terms of being at the top end of this draft. You look at what they've done in their 2 ranks. I mean, Matty Beniers for the University of Michigan put up, I believe, a point per game, which is up there for guys putting up in points per game. As a draft eligible player in college. You look at William Eklund, I believe he's second in the last 10 to 20 years behind, I believe Elias Lindholm's the only one with a higher point per game in the SHL in a draft eligible year in the last 20 years. And so these are 2 guys that really produced at a pretty high level in their leagues. And these are Matty Beniers playing in the NCAA, playing against guys that are up to 23 years old. So playing against guys older than him, significantly so in some cases. And William Eklund also playing in the SHL, playing against men in the Swedish league. And so these are 2 guys that I think both were able to produce and could make the immediate jump into the NHL and make a decent sized impact right away. And so they're not going to be these guys that come in and blow the doors off, but I think that you have to look at the upside there, and I think that they're the 2 highest upside. They're the 2 guys that I think can make the most immediate impact. Sure, Owen Power has his size and everything with that, which allows him to play the game at the NHL level, but I'm worried about a few things with him. I think he's going to be a great defenseman, but I wouldn't take him first overall. I think, for me, what really sold me on Matty Beniers is the fact that looking at some of his transition numbers that Mitch
Yeah.
Brown had shared, and just he's not a guy that's going to kill you with the high end with a high end ceiling in terms of skill. Eklund, I think, is the guy that does that. He's the highest end skill guy. But Matty Beniers is essentially a transition monster. He's a guy that's going to drive play the other way. He's going to be a guy that's going to be an analytics darling. And if he can put up some points along with it, he could be considered one of the better players in the league. And
Yeah.
could and isn't going to be up there with like a McDavid in that class that really blows the doors off, but could be there maybe with like a Sasha Barkov, too high of a ceiling there.
Well, the thing with Beniers that I really love and why I think he would also be my pick at first overall is that you talked about his transition game. The Ducks have not been a very good transition team for a while now.
No.
And so to go and get a center who basically possibly immediately changes that for you, gives you a guy who can do that so well, add him into the mix with the likes of Trevor Zegras and Troy Terry, and all of a sudden your top six looks a lot more interesting getting that puck up ice.
Zegras Beniers 1-2 center could be next year.
Exactly. And I think that could be legitimately a good one too, as soon as next year. And so what I like about Beniers is there is a bit of a floor there. And in this draft with a lot of guys who have this kind of wide range of outcomes, it's nice to know, or at least be so confident in a guy like Beniers, because you feel like you're at least going to get a player who can help your team.
Here's the question. And I think that this is the big question with this. If the Ducks win first overall, will they take Owen Power though?
Well, okay, just to clarify, just to put a bow on that, our plan of attack is go after Beniers.
Yes.
The only other guy I would consider, I think, is Eklund.
Yep.
Because of that skill set. Once he's in the offensive zone, that's maybe what Beniers doesn't have.
Yep.
In terms of what the Ducks will do, I don't know. I mean, do they take another defenseman 2 years in a row?
I mean, the fact that he's a left-hand shot defenseman, so I think that is something going for him. The fact that I really am curious when Bob McKenzie puts out his final list, if anything has changed, because he had 10 out of 10 scouts with Owen Power first. And I think that that's a good sign of where NHL scouts view Owen Power in comparison to everyone else in this draft. And I think not only that, but how high up they have Simone Edvinsson shows how much they really value the size aspect of it, which you and I both just don't value as much as a lot of other aspects of the game.
If you're the Ducks, though, and you're Martin Madden in that chair, and you look at the guys they've drafted over the last couple of years, there's clearly a focus on mobility and skating. And Owen Power is good skating. It's not necessarily a weakness in his game, but I think Matthew Beniers brings that in spades and can really change that dimension for them.
And I think if you want to look at it from that aspect of kind of what the Ducks play or the style they want to play, and the way that Bob Murray has always wanted this team to play, I think Matty Beniers does fit into that style because he's kind of this guy that's known for being hard to play against. He's in on the forecheck. He's almost kind of sort of like a Ryan Kessler type of player. Not necessarily that hard-nosed, but a guy that's going to annoy you, get in on the forecheck, and really get in there. And so I think that there are signs that they could take him. I don't think if they had first overall, they're going to take William Eklund. I think they're too much of a franchise that doesn't want to take a guy that's smaller in stature at that point. And so I think it would probably be between Power and Beniers for them at first overall.
Yeah, man, if they would, I think I said this in the last pod, but taking Owen Power at number 1, I just feel like whoever does that is going to end up regretting it.
Yeah, and that's kind of sort of why I don't want to win the draft lottery, honestly. But then again, there are plenty of smart general managers, smart teams out there that may view it and not want to take Owen Power first overall. They may want to take Matty Beniers or William Eklund. And
exactly.
So then you're left without the option of selecting those players.
Well, especially seeing how the game is played nowadays and watching the playoffs. And it's funny, every year I feel like people the playoffs influences how they approach the draft a little bit. Because it's like, oh, well, look at the teams that are winning. But it's true.
I mean, look at when the Ducks hired Carlisle. He specifically mentioned the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, you need speed. You need skill. And I just don't know how Owen Power fits into that. I think he can be a nice player in the NHL, but I just don't love the ceiling there. Okay, so then this brings me to the next scenario. This is going to be the last scenario. Ducks fall back 2 spots, which I believe would be the furthest they could fall back.
Yeah, they can fall to 4th, which is actually due to draft odds. And by the way, Tankathon, I believe, got clarity on what was going to happen with the Arizona odds.
Hmm.
because if you recall, Arizona's picks are forfeited. So the way that it's going to happen is if they're not redistributing those odds, there will still be Arizona balls in the hopper. But if Arizona is selected, there will be a redraw.
Hmm.
So that's what will happen. By the way, I guess the San Diego Gulls have lost.
Dang.
Yeah,
Eliminated
yeah, eliminated. And
from
so
a tournament they weren't getting paid for.
yeah. So but to get back to where I was
Fourth
going,
overall.
fourth overall is, let me go to pick odds. 49.3% is the chance of them getting fourth overall. So just to run through it for everyone: 12.1% for first overall, 2% or 11.7% for second overall, 26.9% for third overall, 49.3% chance for fourth overall. So almost about a 50% chance they're going to end up with the fourth overall pick.
Hmm. So it's basically a coin flip between getting fourth or somewhere in the top three,
Mm-hmm.
which, that's not terrible, especially in this draft. So let's say that it goes to fourth and that Owen Power is the first overall pick. In this kind of realistic draft scenario for the 2 and the 3 pick, who do you think goes second and third? It's probably some order of Beniers. I
I
think Beniers
think
is in one of those two.
Yeah, so I think if Power doesn't go first, I think he's gonna go second.
Hmm.
I think that's pretty locked in. To be honest, I just think that I think that size is gonna be valued there, and I think Power is gonna go first or second, and then
Yeah.
I think Beniers is gonna go probably second behind him, and then I think it's probably gonna be one of Brant. It's probably gonna be Brant Clark, maybe third.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Unless someone goes crazy and drafts a goalie.
Or takes, I mean, goes completely off board. I mean, here's the thing, and this is the hard thing with this draft.
Yeah. It's
Like,
hard.
there can be guys like that are in the middle teens here that could be taken in the top four. Like, what if someone takes Kent Johnson? Kent Johnson had more points than Matty Beniers.
Yeah.
And when you look at some things, I definitely favor Beniers over Johnson, but some people may look at that. I mean, for God's sake, look at last year when Jack Quinn was taken ahead of Marco Rossi.
Yeah.
And so there are some things with that. I mean, you could see Luke Hughes going in the top four, Simone Edvinsson. Honestly, I like the top four, and I think that the top four, I like the top three of this draft more. I like Beniers, Eichel, and Clark the most, and then Power behind them. But what kind of scares me a bit once you hit 3 to 4 is I don't know what people will do once Beniers and Power are off the board.
Well, I think if it gets to 4, there's still a chance that they grab one of Eklund or Clark.
Yes, agreed.
I,
And that's
I,
the good thing.
And so those are the guys you keep in your back pocket.
Yes, agreed. Agreed. By the way, do you want to explain why you and I aren't as high on Owen Power as some other people are?
Well, I think we've made it pretty clear over the last few weeks, but just to summarize,
we have Duxco asking in our Twitch chat, so I figured I'd just throw that at you to let you explain.
Okay, well, so there's nothing wrong with Owen Power. He projects as a solid NHL defenseman, top 4 kind of guy. The issue is when you're drafting first overall, you want to really get some potential ceiling, some potential offensive ceiling, a guy who can really change your franchise. And with Owen Power, I just don't think he fits that bill. He's a guy who can come in and really solidify your blue line. Like if the Ducks drafted Owen Power, it's not going to be a great pick in the sense of what they left on the table, but he'll still come in and help. He'll still solidify that position. Again, the issue is just that you're leaving a lot of potential on the table. And in the draft, you always want to prioritize. I think you 99% of the time want to prioritize ceiling over anything else. And with Owen Power, I just don't think there's much of a ceiling offensively. And even just in terms of what he's good at defensively, I don't hear a lot of people saying he's a lock to be like a future Norris guy either. So it's just kind of a vanilla pick that I would stay away from at first overall.
Who would you compare Power to if you had to?
Ooh, that is a great question.
From DB Lowry in the chat.
Well, I think that if you look at, like for example, the Ducks roster and just try to use a comparable from there, I think he's kind of like in the Hampus Lindholm type of skill set, but maybe a few shades above or below that, but they are kind of in that similar draft range. I think the reason Power's being projected so high is more of product of the draft class than his own talent. Because if you look at Hampus Lindholm, he went 6th overall. And I think Hampus Lindholm, a lot of the things that people were saying about him are kind of being applied to Power, just a really excellent defensive defenseman. And Power's got some transition ability as well. Like he's a guy who can move that puck, who can attack the offensive blue line. There is upside there. I'm not trying to say that this guy has no potential whatsoever, but he just doesn't have enough to entice me to take him over anyone else.
Yeah.
So
yep.
hopefully I didn't say anything there that made no sense, but I think that's just my view on it. It is also a little biased because I do have clearly a philosophy on the draft and what kind of player I prioritize. But I think that even putting that aside, there's still an argument to be made that he shouldn't go first overall.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, just want to put this out there. Craig Button has his most recent draft list up from May 12th. He had first as Owen Power, second as Brant Clark, third as Simone Edvinsson, fourth Luke Hughes, fifth Matty Beniers, sixth William Eklund, seventh Dylan Gunther. So just for contrast, by the way, Simone Edvinsson on Elite Prospects is at 9, Luke Hughes is at 11. And so that just kind of goes to show you the difference between people's evaluations and the fact that this is not something that's locked in with a top end. I mean, like I said, EP Rinkside says Matty Beniers 1, Craig Button has him at 5. And so there's no consensus. It's all over the place. And so that is the one thing that does kind of scare me. But I also think that you can find value then, which is why getting down to 4th is not this end of the world situation.
No. And I think regardless, the Ducks are going to get a good player.
Yes. And that's the big thing, unless they completely screw it up.
Like in this, if they draft Luke Hughes 4th, that would not be preferable. But the point is, if you look at this class, it's kind of like what we said last year. When you're in that range at 4 or where they were last year, 6th, you're not going to have your pick of the litter unless you get lucky and Trevor Zegras falls to you at 9. God. But you're still going to get a quality player. And at that point, any criticisms of the pick are probably going to be more kind of a little more in the weeds, like I did last year, saying they still should have taken Marco Rossi. My whole point with that was that with Marco Rossi, that was the guy I would have picked. But taking Jamie Drysdale isn't some like cardinal sin. He's a guy who's going to help this franchise.
Can I ask you this? Did you see this today from I believe it was Gord Miller?
No.
Gord Miller tweeted out it was about Mort Seider, the fact that I guess he's playing well, and basically he was saying that all of you that were criticizing the Red Wings need to take it all back now with how well he's been playing. Wasn't a mistake now. And I'm like, have you watched Trevor Zegras play at all this year?
Yeah, now do Philip Broberg.
Yeah, Philip Broberg's the really, really bad one.
Exactly.
But still, like, the fact that you took Mort Seider when you had Dylan Cousins and Trevor Zegras on the board.
Well, I think the fact that he's playing well is that's despite the selection. Like that's kind of saving the face for the decision. So anyway, I don't want to get into that. So let's go to the third part of our mock offseason. Oh, one thing I did want to add. Do you try to add another first round pick in this draft via trade?
I mean, I think they should.
Yeah, because the way that this draft is going to be structured, there's going to be some players that are going to fall. You talked about it, that big wide range of opinions. And so there are teams in this draft who have multiple picks in the first round. And I just don't know. The team that I really looked at was the Columbus Blue Jackets. Is there a deal to be made there? They have 3
because
first round picks.
Having 3 first round picks.
It feels crazy to think that they just that they would go into that draft holding on to all of their first round picks.
Detroit also has 2. Do they hold on to both? I would think they do.
I think they need to because their cupboard is still like so barren.
Yeah.
Not so barren, but just it needs continual restocking. With Columbus, I just don't know where they're at as a franchise. Do they want to get back to being competitive?
I think they're starting to retool or rebuild.
I think they're resetting. I may have heard someone say that, but their roster, there's a lot of tearing down that has to happen there. If you look at their roster, they are not a team that's primed for a rebuild. There's a lot of guys under contract, and I just don't really know what they're going to do. And so maybe if you're the Ducks, you try to go and get a pick, maybe send them Ricard Raquel. I don't know. Try to get Patrick Laine out of there. I just feel like there's an interesting trade to be made there. I just don't really know what direction they're going to end up going in.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But that is something that I would be trying to do if I'm the Ducks.
Quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Which of the players, draft eligible players this year, do you think could immediately make the jump into the NHL?
I think it's probably not that long of a list.
I think it's Beniers and Eklund. I don't think Owen Power should make the jump right away.
Yeah, I don't think Brandt Clark should either.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean it's not a very long list.
I'm even iffy on Eklund and Beniers, but I think that both. I think Power probably could use another year in college or in the AHL.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Beniers maybe could also. I mean, he was really productive, so maybe not. If you look at where he was at with his production last year, I believe he was. Trevor Zegras was around a point per game, maybe a little bit higher during his final year in college. So I think Eklund being good in the SHL, but I mean, he may go back to the SHL for one more year. I mean, it's not out. It's possible that none of the guys make the jump to the NHL in this draft class right away.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the danger maybe of overpaying for another pick is that like we talked about, this draft is so kind of an unknown for a lot of people, and so I don't necessarily know if this is the draft to go all in on getting another pick. We'll see. Okay, let's shift gears to free agency here. So I think this is kind of an easy question. Maybe it's not. But for the Ducks RFAs, what's your view of that situation? Is everyone coming back essentially?
I think everyone should come back.
You qualify everyone.
I think I would qualify. Here's my view of RFAs. You always qualify them.
Yeah, because they're going to be cheap.
They're going to be cheap, and if you want to trade them, or if you don't want them, qualify them and trade them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least get something. Don't lose them for nothing. This was the big issue with freaking Matthew Perreault 5 or 6 years ago. The Ducks couldn't come to terms with him, didn't want to give him a qualifying offer, let him walk for nothing as a result of it. Like, just...
Is there maybe one guy you see them not qualifying?
Danton Heinen, if anyone.
Yeah, same. Well, it's because of his number, right?
He would have to be qualified at 2.8 again.
Exactly. And so that I could see them
once again
not qualifying him.
Once again, well, it's not only that the qualifying offer's at 2.8, it's the fact that he has arbitration rights also.
Exactly. And I mean, look at the way he was handled this year. You know, he played still in a decent amount of games, but the jostling, the fact that we know that they were actively trying to trade him, I could see them maybe not qualifying him. But I think that if this were up to us, I think you just bring everybody back and you go from there. Try to recoup value for Danton Heinen.
And I basically took a look, and if the Ducks were to go sign essentially all their RFAs and UFAs and sign essentially everyone of somewhat importance to this franchise and build out the roster, they would have, I believe it's like roughly $7 or $8 million in cap space next year, and that's prior to needing LTIR. So that essentially gives them a fair amount of cap space to work with. Either if they want to sign a guy or two to a smaller deal. I don't foresee them necessarily using that cap space on a big trade or anything like that, but it gives them the flexibility that they quite frankly did not have this year. And so I could see them signing everyone. I think we went through real quick the evolving hockey. I mean, do you want to just do it one more time? Run through the evolving hockey contract list and see if you think that that's where it's going to be at?
Sure.
Let's do that. So for anyone out there that doesn't know, evolving hockey does an awesome contract projection.
And it ends up being very accurate.
It ends up being very, very accurate. And so here we go. Let's just really jump into this. So Max Comtois, 2 years, $2.75 million.
Sounds about right.
Danton Heinen, 2 times 2.4.
I mean, I'm kind of down on Heinen, but that's still like not a bad deal. It's not taking up a lot of space, and he could bounce back.
And here's the issue. That's less than a qualifying offer.
Well, that's the thing. So to get to that contract, they would have to not qualify him, which could mean he just leaves.
Yep.
And then you lose him for nothing.
Yep. So
the Nick Ritchie trade tree, the Bobby Ryan trade tree dies.
Well, yeah, no. Jacob Silverberg's still on the team.
Yeah, but part of the allure of that trade was getting that high draft pick, and so it would just. Do you see that as bad asset management if they don't qualify him and he just walks?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that even though you don't want to maybe bring him back, just try to recoup value and then trade him. Get him for something more than Jake Virtanen.
Well, that's the reason why you sign him to a qualifying offer.
Yeah.
So let's run through the rest of the RFAs. Sam Steele, 2x2.
I mean, I hate it, but sure.
I honestly think Comtois gets higher than 2.75.
I think he could reach. I think he might get into the threes,
Yep.
like the low threes. I just look at that Ricard Raquel deal, and I think if you look at the year he just had, Max Comtois did. It's very similar.
But the issue is whether he wants term or not. If he goes up in term to around where Raquel did, that's when he's going to get in the threes. I think he gets to hit 2x3.
Yeah, I think that's what will happen. I'll be bold here.
Okay, and then Max Jones 2x1.5.
Sure.
Isaac Lundestrom 2x1.
That actually could be a sneaky value deal with the way he played this year.
Yeah.
So yes.
Volkov 2x883,000. I don't know why it would have to be 2 years, but whatever.
Fourth liner, sure.
Yeah. And then Mahura at 1 year at 792.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if the Ducks will be the ones signing that, but anyway. And then let's get into unrestricted free agents. Did you have any comments though in the RFAs? Last comments?
Nope. I think it's pretty straightforward. You sign them, give them qualifying offers. Worst case, you trade them and get some value back.
Yeah, I just don't think there's going to be this big contentious negotiation with Comtois because the Ducks have the space. They're not in a cap bind. And quite frankly, he earned it. He had a really good season, led the team in scoring. That they're going to pay him, I think. We'll see. We'll see if they apply the Trevor Zegras approach with him. Unrestricted free agents, this should be pretty easy. Ryan Getzlaf.
Yeah, you sign him.
Yeah, I think that he can still be a useful player and maybe even ends up being a really good value deal. I think David Backes is retiring, so he's not coming back. Ryan Miller retiring, Andy Welinski. Decision on Andy Welinski. Decision time.
Who knows what they're going to do with Andy Welinski?
Well, if it's up to me, I'm not bringing back. Just taking another toy away from Dallas Eakins. Carter Rowney, UFA. I feel like you kind of have to let him go just because you want to give that spot to a younger player in the AHL. See what a prospect can do in that spot as opposed to just burning it on a veteran. And then moving down the list after that, a lot of AHL guys that we don't really need to get into. Looking bigger picture though.
I'm gonna throw an audible at you though, not on your notes right now.
Audible me, please.
Do the Ducks give an extension to any player this summer?
So that is kind of actually the elephant in the room because let's face it, Hampus Lindholm.
That's
Josh Manson.
That's the much bigger question than any of the RFA deals besides maybe Comtois and any of the UFA deals this summer. It's whether the Ducks extend any of or all of Raquel, Manson, and Lindholm.
Well, let's just go through the list. Ricard Raquel.
I mean, do you want my opinion? Because my opinion.
Well, no, but remember, this is the plan. This is what you would do.
My personal plan would be to trade all of them this summer.
Yes, I think you trade all of them. People aren't going to want to hear that, but there is just no sense in the Ducks extending any one of these guys. I think that locking in Ricard Raquel to a long-term deal, Josh Manson to a long-term deal, Hampus Lindholm and Manson alone with their injury histories it's a total risk to extend them. And then with Ricard
Lindholm's go ahead.
And I was just going to say with Ricard Raquel, he's the only one that I could see where I don't know what he's going to jump up to. It could be significant, but with the way his recent performance has been, maybe his price tag comes in at a more reasonable rate than you might think. And maybe now is the time to extend him because this is like an all-time low in value. Ricard Raquel might not want to get an extension right now if you look at the season he just had. Actually, the last 2 seasons he just had.
Yeah. I agree. If I'm Ricard Raquel, I want to be traded to up my value and hit UFA status. I don't want to sign an extension this summer.
So for Ricard Raquel...
Then again, on the flip side of that, he
might just want to stay in Anaheim.
Well, on the flip side of that, also, he may view it as for sure value with whatever money they're going to give him. And it's something that's on the table right now.
That's the thing, because if he gets traded and he has another bad season, then you're left high and dry. But I would be just looking to trade all of them. Just get whatever you can and move on and just turn the page. And particularly for Manson, he just hasn't been good. Like this season, he was bad. We gave him, I think, a D minus on the last show. And with Lindholm, the health concerns are there. And it sucks to say because I really like Hampus Lindholm as a player, but I just think it's time.
Here's the only thing I would do. If the Ducks went the route that I said they should of exposing Cam Fowler, that is the only way I would provide Hampus Lindholm a contract extension. Because I can guarantee you that Hampus Lindholm is going to be looking for the Cam Fowler extension at least next summer, and or that contract. Because I mean, you look at the importance of the franchise. You look at it. I mean, it's pretty easy to say that Hampus Lindholm has been a more important defenseman to the Ducks than Cam Fowler has been over the entirety of both their tenures. And so if you're Hampus Lindholm, you're like, my contract starts there and goes up from there. And so I think the only way I would extend Hampus Lindholm is if I somehow got rid of Cam Fowler's contract. I don't think that you can have two of those deals on your cap going into your contending window as they're going into their mid to late 30s. Like, those are deals that you can have two of if you are smack dab in the middle of your contending window. You can have guys 27, 28, 29 making a good amount of money, but you can't have guys in their early to late 30 or early to mid 30s doing that as you're starting to enter a contending window, which is where the Ducks will be.
And again, the Ducks are going to have to extend Trevor Zegras at some point, and
they're going to have to extend Jamie Drysdale at some point.
Yeah, and like those could be big ones, and then whoever they end up drafting this year, like there's
a lot of who knows if they try to pull off a big trade, there's money there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think even though for a lot of fans it's hard to hear to trade these guys, I think it's the best move for the future of the franchise.
Well, and you can also recoup future asset or future value. It's not as if we're saying trade these guys because they're and you're not going to get anything in return. We're saying trade these guys because, especially Lindholm, you would get a king's ransom in terms of
he's a first pairing defenseman who any team he goes to instantly gets better.
Like I think when I put together my article, the closest comparable I could find was really like a Ryan McDonough deal, which got a couple of I think a first round pick and some players and everything like that. So it was a pretty big return. It was basically, I mean, 1 year left on Hampus Lindholm will get the Ducks what they wanted to get for Josh Manson for 2 years.
Yeah, and then for Josh Manson, I don't know what the return is anymore after kind of the way his career is trending a little bit. I still would imagine that the perception of him is positive, and the fact that he's a rental at this point, a 1 year rental, is going to help move him out. But I'm curious what they could go get for him now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think you move Manson. By the way, I don't think he gets moved before the expansion draft. I had some people mention that to me with my expansion draft article, saying the Ducks should basically just be looking to move Manson before the expansion draft. That way, it opens them up to go 7-3-1 and everything like that. I'm like, the issue there is that if that was the case, then the Ducks should have just moved him at the deadline when they could have gotten he could have gotten a one playoff run with a team prior to the expansion draft, if that was the reasoning. Because there's no difference from an expansion draft perspective of trading him at the deadline and trading him now. And that was the big thing that everyone said, was the expansion draft made it hard for him to be moved. And so if that's the case, that's going to be the same issue now, except you don't even have the leverage of the playoff runs as a result of that. So there's absolutely no reason why they would trade Josh Manson. There's absolutely nothing they would get in return for him.
Before the expansion draft.
What did I say?
No, I'm just adding that in just to make sure.
But before the expansion draft. And to me, it's a situation of a strict kind of trade valuation. If I'm the Ducks, I'm protecting Josh Manson over. Basically, I'm protecting Manson and Lindholm over basically anyone else because of how big their trade value could be. Then those two and Raquel, because of essentially their trade value in the summer after the expansion draft happens. So, and what they can get in return is going to be important potentially to the Ducks in the future.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And then as far as what you think happens, just let's play that game. Do you think any of them get extended this summer?
I think one or two.
Two. So here's the thing. If I'm a player right now, do I really want to be extended in this ecosystem with this kind of financial situation in the NHL? Do I want to just put that off a year, see how the league recuperates?
Maybe
the money will be flowing a little better by then.
I think it's a it depends on where you think the market's going to go. I
Well,
think
it's also
I think as a player, if
the personality of the player is important here because
Yeah.
are you willing to withstand that uncertainty for a year, and then you could be left high and dry.
And if you're Manson or Lindholm or Raquel, actually, all three of them were hurt this year.
Yep.
What if you sustain an injury, and like we were talking about Andre Kasha, and,
I mean,
and if
with
you
Manson,
get hurt going into being a UFA,
with Manson and Lindholm, the way the last couple years have gone, you can almost pencil in an injury for next year. I mean, if Manson keeps fighting,
yeah,
like you can pencil in.
But
injury.
so that's kind of my point is these are guys that basically. Well, I think that if the money's put in front of them, I think they're guys that will take it as a result of that because I think with being injured and everything like that. So,
but do the Ducks want to do that?
They shouldn't.
Are they going to be the ones to initiate the extension?
No,
it's good. I could see none of them getting extended this summer. I think one of them will. I think that there's enough outside forces to where some of them may just not want it this summer. We'll see.
You know, I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Uh-oh.
The most likely to get extended is Josh Manson.
Yep.
Because think about the quotes that we've heard from like
Murray.
Elliot Friedman. What is it? What was the quote that Elliot Friedman had about Bob Murray? Now I'm spacing on the exact verbiage.
Well, he doesn't. You don't love your mother as much as he loves Josh, or something like that. You don't love your family as much as he loves Josh Manson. Yeah. Oh, that's going to be a bad one. I can guarantee whatever next contract he gets is going to be a bad deal because look at the way his career is trending. Again, it's trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And I don't see that going just magically back up.
The bummer is at one point in time, he was such an underrated defenseman.
I know. It really does suck because I remember when he first came up and for a couple of years there, he was this like analytics darling and people were talking about him as one of the more underrated players in the league. And now he's kind of overrated, if anything.
Yeah.
So it sucks to see that arc, but hey, that's what happens. Aging curves.
Yep.
That's how these things go.
I mean, that is legitimately the arc of an aging curve. People, I mean, what is it? Bob Murray had the quote saying, "You're not in your prime until you're at 29." It's look at Josh Manson's career. Like, he broke into the league at what, 24, 25 around there. I think it was the 20, it would have been the 2015, 2016 playoffs or 2015-16 was his first year with the team. So this would be his sixth season. So he broke in at about 24 and 24, 25, 26 were all of his peak years. His best seasons, which also puts into contrast when you think about it, Hayden Fleury and kind of him coming over and people claiming he's young and all that stuff. It's like, well, 24, 25, 26, Lindholm, Manson were the best defensemen on the team.
Yeah, well, Lindholm still is, but...
Well, no, but my point is I think that's a contrast for everyone out there with where Fleury's at. I don't think he's near the level where either of those guys were at that time.
No, and that's the thing is Murray views that as this guy will actually end up getting better from where he is now, where it's actually usually the opposite. Where you are now in that mid-20s range, it might be your peak, and it's actually only going to go down from there, so... Don't want to bum anyone out there. This is strictly applying to the statistical production of professional hockey players. This is not about real life. You're just hitting your peak once you get into your 30s. You're just
Thank you.
You're just entering the fun zone. There you go.
Thank you.
A little olive branch for everybody there. Okay. Let's just quickly talk about this free agent class. Let me ask you this. We can make this very quick.
No,
are the Ducks gonna go sign Alex Ovechkin? No. That's the big question here.
No. I mean, here's the other thing. So, real quick, the only player that I would really target from this unrestricted free agency class would maybe be
David Backes?
Dougie Hamilton.
Okay.
I think would maybe be the only one I would look at.
Do you really see that?
No.
I mean, doesn't that go counter to everything you've been saying, though? He's 28.
Yeah.
He's going to get a big contract.
They shouldn't. He's the only one I would potentially do it for, though. Because I think Dougie Hamilton's very, very good and is like he instantly becomes the best Ducks defenseman for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. So the thing with unrestricted free agents is that those are the guys that make sense, like you've already said, for contending teams.
Yep.
For teams that are in the thick of it, that are a player or two away, that need to just tinker their roster. The Ducks aren't there. Hopefully, I'm not breaking any news there, but they're not there, and so. You really want to stay away from the bigger money guys, and you don't
want to commit long-term money. I mean, it's basically the exact conversation we just had about Cam Fowler's deal. Is essentially the same thing that applies to essentially almost all of these players.
I would kind of love to see them bring back some of the former Ducks just on cheap deals, like Andrew Cogliano, Corey
I
Perry.
mean, basically the
I
only
mean,
free agents that you and I want are basically like Ducks fandom, like the Ducks fandom, like going all out and
yeah,
just basically bringing back all the nostalgia. Bring in Bobby Ryan, bring in Corey Perry, have a fourth
yeah.
line of the RPG line. Just do it.
And by the way, I'm just saying this like kind of tongue in cheek. Analytically speaking, these are still not guys that you should probably be
No,
bringing on. Again,
no.
you want to see the Ducks make as much room as possible next year, even more so than they did this year for youngsters. And so, are they going to bring back Carter Rowney? I feel like they might. It's just a random thought that popped into my
I
head.
have no idea. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, he was good for them when he
I
played
mean,
this
they
year.
they did try to plug that hole and never really found a guy to really go into that spot. So maybe
Wow, disrespectful to Sam Carrick.
disrespectful. Sam Carrick never even played in that role though. He was put on big
Kinda.
on. He was never put on
That's
the
true.
fourth line.
That's true. He was on a higher role.
Yeah, like come on.
Or technically a lower role, given that the Grant line
Volkov was
Yeah.
really the one that was put in there and never really could fit the billing.
Was Volkov worse than Rowney?
Yes.
That's not what you want to hear.
No.
But anyway,
No, that is not. I mean, Carter Rowney, by the way, I mean he's 32. Granted,
yeah.
like the Ducks
But
gave Derek Grant a 3-year deal at 30 years old. So,
Oh yeah, they're not afraid. I mean, hey, maybe Jeff Solomon comes in and just
fingers
whips
crossed.
everybody to shape.
Fingers crossed.
I don't know. I feel like I might be overrating him. I haven't really.
Just continually sending out emails about aging curves.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know. Looking at this class again, having scrolled through it a few times, it's a big stay away for me. There's just the Ducks in this era of the flat cap need to just hang on to that cap space. And as you've said in the past, weaponize it and just be ready to pounce on an opportunity if it presents itself.
And speaking of that,
don't needlessly commit.
Speaking of that, I mean, do you think the Ducks weaponize or use that cap space to get a Jack Eichel? Or, and the reason I bring that up is I had a couple DMs, and depending on how the Jets-Oilers game goes tonight, the fact that the Oilers could potentially be swept by the Jets, and if Connor McDavid somehow requests a trade, do you move heaven and earth to get him?
Well, yeah, that's kind of like that's the like sanity test, right?
Yeah.
It's like in football. If Aaron Rodgers is available, you pick up the phone no matter what. It's the same thing in hockey. If Connor McDavid is available,
would you
pick up the phone.
Trade Zegras, Drysdale, and whatever else needs to get done for Connor McDavid? Would you use Zegras,
Yes.
Drysdale, and the first overall pick?
It's Connor McDavid.
Yeah, no.
He's
I'm just throwing this out there for you.
He's the best player in the NHL.
Would the Oilers do that?
Well, if you're in a position where you he wants out, you kind of have to take the best deal available. And if that's on the upper,
fire Carlisle with a good point. McDavid wouldn't waive his no movement clause. Wait, no, he doesn't have a no movement clause. He can't.
Nope.
He can't have a no movement clause because you cannot have those until you are in your UFA years. So he's in the similar situation as Jack Eichel.
Yeah, I mean, it would just, I think, suck for Ducks fans to see Trevor Zegras go to Edmonton and become a star. But
it's Connor McDavid.
Edmonton has not been kind to star players, and it's Connor McDavid. He's 24, and
like McDavid is the best player in the world.
Exactly. And yeah, it sucks that you give up Zegras and Drysdale, but you're getting the best player in the world, and that opens up options. That's kind of, to me, the argument for getting Jack Eichel is that even if you lose out on a Zegras, a pick, and Comtois, or some kind of version of that medley, having Jack Eichel on your team, in theory, should give you options, right? Because at that point, all you need to do is surround him, make it work, and your ceiling goes up.
Connor
right?
McDavid on his own could make the Ducks a playoff team, basically.
Right. And I don't know, do we see Zegras getting to the point where he's as good as Jack Eichel?
Do I see Zegras? I was going to say he's definitely not McDavid, obviously.
No, I mean, no one is.
Yeah. Maybe Jack Eichel, maybe. And that's
so hard to say.
That's why I would be hesitant to move him for Eichel, is that he could potentially be at that same level of a 70, 80 point producer, maybe at a point per game in the NHL.
Maybe, but like that's the best case scenario, right? Like that's
But the other question that's kind of out there is, would McDavid's McDavid being available for a trade lower the market for Eichel?
Yes, it would,
And
because
make it smart to and also DB Lowry points out, and this is something people have mentioned, and I don't know how much I actually agree with this, but Eichel does have that injury now, and so that may lower his trade value in some way.
here's the thing though, and now this is getting into not really that rational or logical. I'm going to put that aside for a second. Trevor Zegras is a star in the making. He has the personality. Everybody seems to love him. He's a star on the ice. He's already productive as a rookie center. He's just a guy who I think is going to be a guy that people pay to go watch at the Honda Center.
Agreed.
And I just think that giving that up, even if maybe it's the right thing to do, would just
it'd be hard.
Something about it just
for Connor
McDavid.
Right for Connor McDavid,
yes.
You do it.
For Connor McDavid, yes, because he's the best player in the world. But for anything below that, I don't know. It just, maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Maybe I'm overrating Zegras based on a small sample. Maybe he's not going to be that. But he's done nothing to dissuade me from that opinion so far.
Yeah.
If anything, he's made me more of a believer.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of just, again, maybe irrational, maybe illogical, I kind of just want to see it through. I want to see it happen in Anaheim. I want to see them have another star. I think it would just be good for this market to have a player. And look, maybe Jack Eichel comes in and is that and instantly replaces that. But there's just something to the homegrown star, right? That you just can't replace. Yep. And it would just be cool to see.
Yep. Would you do Matty Beniers plus something for Eichel?
Sure. Yes. Okay. Yes. Of course, yes.
So that's what I've been wondering is if the Ducks win first overall, would they trade that for Eichel? And essentially your Buffalo will then have potentially number 1 and number 2 overall.
Yes. Yes, because I mean, if you have Eichel and Zegras,
does Buffalo do that? What would you have to add to make it work?
I mean, it just feels like they're going to have to trade Max Comtois to get.
And I'd do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and I would do that too. As much as I like the season he's had.
Is a first in Comtois enough? No.
No, hell no. You have to add in something else.
First plus Comtois plus Manson.
Yes, if I'm the Ducks, I do that.
I'm just throwing things out there to see what I understand. The Ducks would do that. Do you think Buffalo does that?
It all depends on what the offers are on the table for them.
Yeah, because I think that's
looking at where they're at. I don't know if they want to be bad again. I think they want to get back into the picture,
and that's why I think giving them the first to get first and second overall, 2 guys that could potentially jump in the NHL right away. Then you give up, and we've talked about that. I don't think bringing in Eichel makes that much sense for the Ducks, but I think if you can do it without losing one of Zegras or Drysdale, I think you try to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think if you can do it with the first, whatever the first round pick is this year, and then Comtois gives them a guy who was the leading goal scorer on the Ducks, leading point getter on the Ducks this past year, and Manson gives them a heavy modern day right hand,
defenseman.
Yep. Going.
That's where he's at.
Yep. That's where it's at. So. Okay. I do that. DB Lowry asked, would it be smarter for the Ducks to target Reinhart instead of Eichel?
I don't really have strong opinions on Reinhart.
I don't either.
Let's see a player card.
That was because he's been a name that's kind of been in the trade market. Some people saying that he's the better player to pick up in terms of value that you get in terms of
that sounds kind of crazy.
In terms of what you would have to give up.
Yes, in terms of pure value, sure. I mean, Sam Reinhart's good, so it might make sense that he's 25. The thing is, I think he's a free agent this offseason, so RFA, I don't know what your RFA. But to qualify him, you're going to have to pay at least 5.2. I don't know. I mean, it would depend what you have to give up.
Yep.
I mean, this is kind of something I haven't thought too much about. So.
Looking at his player card, he's a guy that's more so. Where his value has come for the Ducks is essentially, or not the Ducks, for the Sabres, is in the defensive zone. He's not a guy that's really driven offense. And so he's a guy that I think certainly helps them out and gives them a better type of talent. But he's not exactly helping out this team that struggles to score.
Yeah. Again, if I'm the Ducks, and unless I'm making a selling type move, I'm not really looking to bring in these kind of guys who aren't really stars, I'm either looking to get a star or selling. Those are to me the only two modes that I'm really looking at in the offseason. I guess to round out the offseason plan, do you come back next year with the same coaching staff?
I clean house next year. I would have cleaned. I would have cleaned house this summer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a given, which is why I didn't really include that in here. Okay. Well, do you want to go into questions? Because that's all I've got. This was pretty thorough.
Yeah, so
I'm happy with it.
if anyone has some questions, throw them into the Twitch chat. But so those of you watching on YouTube, yes, we're on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/crashthepond or your favorite podcast services. We do this live each and every time at twitch.tv/crashthepond. Typically Sunday, today Monday. Who knows when it will be next week? We'll discuss and put it out there. Whether we do another Sunday or maybe we do a Memorial Day. Monday's Memorial Day, right?
I don't know. That's
Episode?
gonna be a tough one.
Well, we'll figure it out. Is it?
There might be some recovering going on.
Well, we'll figure it out. So
We'll see.
it sounds as if Monday is more likely than Sunday next week from that conversation. But regardless, back to the point. You can find us at twitch.tv/crashthepond where you can help support the show. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days. And it does help out the show significantly. You get special emotes in the chat, special badges next to your name. And yeah. By the way, the draft lottery is that next Wednesday?
Might be.
Has that come up that quick and I've just completely missed that?
Well, the month of May is over soon.
Yeah,
So
that is kind of crazy to me. Let's see. NHL draft.
June 2nd. No, June 2nd. Unless I'm getting that way wrong.
NHL draft. Where
See
is
news. You got to go Google News on this.
when is the NHL draft lottery? I've got the Sporting News open.
Wednesday, June 2nd.
So yeah, a week.
That could be our watch along.
A week from Wednesday. Well, that could be our watch along for the month of June.
There you go.
Let us know.
That's
Let us know, people, if you want that, or in our Patreon Discord, if you
Or
want
we-
that to be the watch along, or we just do that on Twitch.
We could just do a stream,
Yeah,
as is tradition at this point.
yeah, we could
We've
just
got
do
2
that.
years running.
We could do that. That's probably the better.
Okay.
route. So question from Ginger Wolf said, "What are the top 3 things each of you are looking forward to in the Ducks 21-22 season?"
I am top 3. Do you want to do a cumulative 3?
Sure.
Or do you want to go 3 each? Because I feel like 3 each may take a while.
Let's do cumulative.
Cumulative 3. I'll give you one. Trevor Zegras.
Damn
Simple.
it. Why'd you
A
have
full
to,
season of Trevor Zegras at center.
Why'd you have to steal that one? Why'd you have to?
Okay,
go there?
I'll give you another one.
No. I'll.
Okay.
Lucas Dostal making his NHL debut.
You think he's going to play in the NHL?
Sure.
I mean, he might, just because
Yeah.
maybe one of Gibson or Stolarz gets hurt. and he
That's
gets called up.
exactly what I'm thinking.
I am excited to see. This is number 3 for me, or our cumulative 3. I'm just excited to see where this goes. I feel like next season, for better or worse, is going to decide a lot of things. This season should have decided everything, but it won't, clearly. I think that next season is going to be interesting because if the Ducks are good, which I don't think they will, but if, let's say, the Ducks are competitive, if they what the heck, make the playoffs, if they squeeze in or if they're close, does the gang get brought back? Does Murray and Co, is Aikens, is everybody back? Does everybody get extended?
Do we see a mid-season firing for the Ducks next year?
So that's the thing. And this is the flip side of that coin, is if things go real sour, if things go real bad, the Samiolis don't have to care anymore about firing these guys.
It's much more palatable to fire a guy with 6 months left as compared to a year and a half.
Exactly. And so that's where maybe we see a firing. If, Aikens talked about the negativity of this team, that could very well happen again. And I could definitely see a scenario where someone just has to go just to kind of air things out. And, based on what, and just based on the Jeff Solomon thing, it's hard to believe that he would have left LA to Anaheim with no thought, with no
Guaranteed
without a promise of some future opportunity.
Like that,
And
yeah. Because, let me just be frank here. I don't necessarily see the Samiolis as being someone to outbid the Anschultz group.
Exactly.
In terms of a guy that is clearly valued by the Kings.
I think this is a chess move by Solomon because I think he's been promised something. And that could mean that if things go real sour, maybe they just clean house midseason. Who knows? But anyway, all this to say, to round out the three, I'm just it's like a potential car accident waiting to happen. I want to see what happens. It's like following a show. You
Okay.
want to see how it gets
Sorry,
resolved.
I'm gonna give a fourth one from me to make it. We each get two.
Okay.
The reuniting of Getzloff, Perry, and Bobby Ryan.
Oh, you wish that happens.
Yeah. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. I'm so excited. Shouts to Ducks Go for giving us 1,000 bits. So thank you so much. He thinks that we don't believe in our scouting and we don't understand the 2022 draft class in 2023, and we aren't trading Comtois. The Ducks could very well be bad next year. Neither of us have talked about trading the 2022 or 2023 first round picks. I think the Ducks should hold on to both of those.
Yes,
without a doubt.
100% should.
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of people are going to be trading those.
And the reason why the Ducks should be trading Comtois is basically he had a
sell high.
Sell high. Ridiculously high shooting percentage. There's potential that it could become sustainable long term, but there's also potential that he ends up going cold and essentially is what Raquel is without the shot volume.
Yeah, I'm a little higher on Comtois than you are, but yeah, that's a possibility, and that's the argument for trading him.
Yep. And so I think that's probably going to do it for us today.
Wow, this is record time for us. This is below the 2-hour mark, which we've been vilified for.
We have been. We will get into that in a second. We haven't really been that vilified.
No, it was. I think it was a healthy comment.
It was.
Well, okay. Well, I guess. Did you have anything else you want to say? We have a little window here. Get it all out.
I'm good. I want to go and watch the Oilers Jets game that's in overtime right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch the Habs Leafs game that I still have no idea what happened.
Nobody's spoiling the Twitch chat.
I'm not looking at the chat, so you can spoil it. It doesn't matter.
So wait, you just said I can spoil it for you?
No, you can't. The chat can, because I can't see it. So there you go. God. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for us tonight, guys. This was a fun show. I enjoyed this one. Hopefully you did too. If you enjoy what we do here, if you enjoy the podcast, there's a few different ways that you can support us. The biggest one, and we've mentioned it a few times already, is our Patreon page. That's at patreon.com/crashthepond. So for $1 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat, which is just so much fun. It's where you can connect with other diehard fans, shoot the shit. You can talk about hockey, right? We have a hockey channel. We also have just a general chat. Both are fun. And it's just a healthy place that is kind of rare on the internet, especially if you're a heavy Twitter user. You know how toxic that can get. So it's just a fun, harmonious environment where everybody's just trying to have a good time. So that's for $1 a month. For $5 a month, you get access to that and 2 bonus episodes. So if you enjoy this show, if you want to hear more of it, if you want to hear, maybe if you enjoy kind of like the banter, the back and forth, the lighter side of it, you definitely get that on the bonus episodes. But we also go more in depth. We talk about the Ducks in even greater depth than we do on this show. And we also do league-wide rankings. We pick our awards every year. We do playoff predictions. And especially this time of year, that $5 tier is a good deal just because we get out some of my favorite ones, which are playoff heavy. And then for $15 a month, so you get access to everything I just talked about, and you also get access to 2 live watch-alongs every month. And so for those, during the regular season, we do a live broadcast of Ducks games. We give you a live commentary feed during the Ducks game. And then the off-season, we're going to do playoff games. With the Ducks off-season, we're going to do playoff games. And then as the off-season wears on, the Stanley Cup playoffs subside, we'll probably do past Ducks games. We'll do different things to spice that one up. Maybe we'll do the draft on there. Who knows? But it's a good tier. It's full value, and we really do appreciate it. That's at patreon.com/crashthepond. Now, another way that you can support us, which is totally free, just search Crash the Pond on Apple Podcasts, and you can leave us there a rating and a review, and we promise to read it on the show. And so we're going to stay true to that here. This one comes from Anna Ducks 7
out of the Philippines. So thank you so much.
Shout out to the Philippines. This is our first review from the Philippines, so I'm very thankful to hear that someone over there is listening to us. So this is the title of the review. A nice podcast, and this, by the way, 5 stars. So thank you for the 5 stars. A nice podcast that could use a shorter runtime. I love this podcast that discusses the Ducks. My only concern is that it runs way too long for a podcast. I would be listening to more episodes if they ran for an hour or less. Fair critique, Anna Duck 7. Fair critique. Personally, the way that we structure our show, we're a weekly show and we have to cover a lot of ground. We have to cover a lot of topics. And so it's hard to condense all of that into 1 hour, especially given how Jake and I both are pretty verbose, can be long-winded. And so we're not necessarily good at keeping it short.
Neither of us are good at ending things as we are going on right now, and why we had a 2.5-hour episode last week.
Well, that was because of the player grades. Actually, I listened back to that episode.
No, the last like 30 to 40 minutes, last like 10 to 20 minutes was not anything I think about the Ducks.
What crushed us was how long we talked about David McNabb. That really was the one that crushed us. Anyway, but hey, constructive criticism, we're here for it. We appreciate the kind words, and we'll try to keep it tight.
Yeah.
But it's probably still going to be over an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Although I do want to put this out there, if any of you are kind of in that same boat, and not that we would do this, we probably are just going to keep this to once a week. But if you have any like suggestions for formats, we're more than open to listening and hearing them. So let us know if you would prefer twice a week at an hour for each of them, or prefer this at once a week for an hour and a half. We've just found that this works the best with our schedule, with everything we do with Patreon also.
Yeah, and also, I mean, look, if one person wanted to say this and put it out there, there's probably a few more that think this. So just let us know. Like we can handle it.
Kempafu says, "Go back to after every game."
Yeah, that was super sustainable. That was the best one.
By the way, Kempafu says Habs and Leafs decided they just wanted to play for fun and not keep score.
I almost just lost it there. I was just gonna be like, really? My heart dropped. You just had to do that to me.
Don't blame me, blame him. I asked him, I was like, do I have to read this to terrify Felix?
Well, you didn't have to read it. You could have kept it to yourself.
He said yes. I'm loyal to our listeners.
Okay. Well, I need to end this fast. Okay. Check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/crashthepond. You get to see the video version of this feed. Get to see Salem the Black Cat on Jake's camera. You get to see my usually gray t-shirt. It's a great addition, the video element. That's on YouTube. We're also on Spotify. Check us out there. Go to crashthepond.com, read Jake's article, bookmark it.
Yes.
Because as the
a lot of good info in there.
As the expansion draft approaches, you're gonna want to have that just memorized, so that you don't have to, and you can be the person who's answering questions, because there's always someone who's not sure how this works. And I mean, rightfully so. It's kind of complicated. You can also find us on social media at Crash the Pond is on Twitter, also on Facebook. Jake is on Twitter at Reindeer Games 91. Follow him. And I'm on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. So that is going to do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, and we will talk to you at the next show. Have a good one.
Bye.